What is going on, everybody? Doing something a little different for today's video. And if it gets a little bit of traction, we can keep doing these. I wanted to see what the community thinks about different things. So for the past few weeks, I've been posting some random polls pertaining to old school RuneScape stuff on my community page, and they've been getting a pretty good amount of votes to get us an idea of what the old school community thinks about certain different things, whether it be their favorite raid, what kind of god sword is the best, which obviously we'll be checking out in this video, and some other things. It's just interesting to see. And I'll also give you my take on these polls as well, see if I agree with them or not. Before we get into the content of today's video, if you haven't done so yet, there is a link in the description below that you can check out that will take you to my old school RuneScape merch store. Everything in this shop is handmade by me in my office at home and shipped directly to you. Got a whole lot of different stuff in there: can koozies, pint glasses, beer glasses, stickers, decals, t-shirts, and I've got a couple of new products on the way, hoping to get them in the store by about mid-April. So if you haven't yet, check out the link down below, check out the merch store, let me know what you think. All right, so my main purpose for doing this is finding out what the community thinks about different things. Now, with the jagex polls, we get to vote on different kinds of content that are going to be coming to the game. Now, we don't necessarily get a huge say in the start of the content coming to the game, or if they're fixing something or updating something, reworking something. It's more or less jagex is like, hey, we're gonna do this, what do you want? And they give us a few options to vote on. The community doesn't really get to drive the update as far as I can see it, in a way where we get to say, this is exactly what we want, and then you vote on it. Not all of these polls will be pertaining to content that's coming into the game or being added to the game or fixed or reworked. Some of them will, but regardless, you'll still get to see a little bit of what the community thinks about certain things. Now, when I was wondering what kind of polls to do, the first one that came to me was, how many hours per day do you play old school RuneScape? As for the choices for this one, I gave people between 0 and 4 hours, between 5 and 8, between 9 and 12, and more than 12 hours per day. Unsurprisingly, the top answer out of 9,400 votes was between 0 and 4. 72% of 9,400 people said that they play old school RuneScape between 0 and 4 hours a day. Only 5% said they play more than 12 hours, and that is a lot of old school RuneScape time. Now, for this poll, it does make a lot of sense. According to the analytics on my YouTube page, my highest viewer age is between 25 and 34 years old. 77.3% of views to my channel are people between those ages. Next behind that is between 18 and 24 years at 12.9%, and not really that far behind, 35 to 44 years old at 7.2%. And 0.7% of my views actually come from people who say they are 65 years and older. Now, this isn't surprising for a couple of reasons. Old school RuneScape is an old game. People that are 25 to 34 years old have been probably playing RuneScape for a very long time, just like me. I started playing old school RuneScape in 2003. I am 33 years old now. I've been playing this game for almost 20 years. I started in late 2003 on my very first account. Now, a lot of people probably fall into that. People have jobs now. People have kids. They have family stuff to do, things around the house. So between 0 and 4 hours makes a lot of sense. As for me, though, content creation is kind of a side job for me, so I probably fall most days between 5 and 8 hours a day, sometimes very occasionally between 9 and 12. I could not tell you the last time that I played RuneScape in a single day for more than 12 hours. So if you're ever wondering how much do people actually play, well, a good majority of them seem to play between 0 and 4 hours a day. The next thing I asked the community is, what is the most practical or useful god sword? Now, out of your choices, you have 5 now: the Saradomin God Sword, the Bandos God Sword, Zamorak God Sword, Armadillo God Sword, and the Ancient God Sword. So, if you were guessing, or if you did vote in this, and you voted for the Saradomin God Sword, you would be in the majority that thinks it is the most practical or useful God Sword. Out of 12,000 votes, 53% of people said that the Saradomin God Sword was the most popular. Behind that came the Bandos God Sword at 38%, Zamorak God Sword at 1%, Armadillo Godsword at 5%, and the Ancient Godsword at 3%. And I think this really falls into a really good voting perspective. As for me, the most useful and practical Godsword for me is the Bandos Godsword. I do a lot of bossing. I do a lot of stuff that requires defense reduction. So that one is actually the most popular for me. A couple of years ago, when I was doing regular Slayer tasks, I probably would have voted the Saradomin Godsword at that time, but for me, it's the Bandos Godsword. As for the Zamorak, Armadillo, and Ancient Godsword, the Armadillo and Ancient Godswords really only have their niche in PKing because of the special attack with the Armadillo Godsword and the Ancient Godsword. As for the Zamorak Godsword, the only place that I really see it viable anymore is at muted isles when you're trying to freeze it from going to the meat tree to eat. Now, don't get me wrong, I do still use the Saradomin Godsword quite a bit when I do have a regular Slayer task that's not really worth skipping or blocking, but the Bandos Godsword is definitely my most used one personally. The next question I asked was PVM or PvP. Now this one is probably not going to come as a shock to anyone. It actually didn't get that many votes, which was surprising to me. 3,900 votes at the time that I took the screenshot for this video. Out of those 3,900 votes, 93% of those people said PVM, which is player versus monster. Only 7% voted PvP. Now, if we take this into perspective though, the majority of players nowadays only focus on PVM, maxing accounts, getting quests done, the achievement diaries. The PvP community is nearly non-existent when compared to its heyday in the mid to late 2000s. In 2006, 7, somewhere around that area, you could not find an open spot in the wilderness where you were not at risk. Nowadays, I can go out to the wilderness and pretty much do whatever I want outside of the newly updated bosses and never be bothered. I've done Slayer tasks out there. I do clues every day, multiple clues every day that take me to the wilderness, and I rarely ever see a soul. If I do ever see someone, they're usually just altering bones at the Chaos Altar or doing a wilderness Slayer task. And that really tells you a lot about the PvP state of the game. The PvP state of this game has been broken for a long time, and it really needs some close scrutiny, some good updates, and something to bring that PvP community back. There is still a large majority of players that do enjoy PKing, but it is just not the same that it used to. Jagex is constantly adding new bosses to the game. We see that recently with the Phantom Muspa, and we're getting the Desert Treasure 2 bosses pretty soon, I would assume. So that's just a couple more things that have been added to the game while still neglecting PvP. RuneScape's PvP system was actually very unique in the MMORPG world, and I really think it needs to get back to that. If you did have that, you'd probably bring in an influx of players that do like PvP content, if not people that used to play and just came back to the game. Our next question that I asked the community is, what is your favorite old school RuneScape raid? We have 3 to pick from now: the Chambers of Xeric, the Theater of Blood, and the Tombs of Amasket. If you voted or thought that the Tombs of Amasket was the most popular choice, then you would be correct. Out of 4,600 votes, 52% of these people said that the Tombs of Amasket is their favorite raid. Chambers of Xeric was second at 28% and the Theater of Blood at 20%. Do I agree with this? Not really. The Tombs of Amasket is very easy, to say the least. You can start, and the invocation system actually makes this possible. You can start at a very, very easy raid and work your way all the way up to something incredibly difficult once you get into the 500 plus invocation range. As for the second choice, Chambers of Xeric, I do like the Chambers of Xeric, but it still isn't my choice. I would personally be in the group that the Theater of Blood is actually my favorite raid. Now, I've only done 90 of them. I just haven't really had the drive to go back, but it is a very fun raid, and I like the Theater of Blood the most because of its unique mechanics. You can't really just go in here and expect to just dominate the Theater of Blood. You actually have to understand the game mechanics, how moving works, how attack moving works. Things of that nature actually make the Theater of Blood a pretty difficult raid. Now, the thing I do like about the Tombs of Amasket is the invocation system. If jagex could find a way to work an invocation system like that into the Theater of Blood and Chambers of Xeric and make them accessible to more people, not only people that have never raided before, but also people that are seasoned raiding veterans that can choose difficulties and get better as they go and work their way up to those higher invocation levels. I really think it could benefit both the Theater of Blood and the Chambers of Xeric. Now, the Theater of Blood obviously does have entry and hard mode. However, it's not customizable. It is completely linear. It is the same all the time. As for the Chambers of Xeric, you have the normal Chambers of Xeric, which is getting a little stale because of the scouting perspective, as well as the challenge mode Chambers of Xeric, which is also a linear raid. It is always the same thing, and the only way the difficulty scales is the more people or less people that you have in the team. As for what they did the best job on, I definitely think they did do the best job on the Tombs of Amascut, not just because of the invocation system, but because of some of the graphics we see within the raid. So for me, the Theater of Blood actually is my favorite old school RuneScape raid that I have done. I would actually love to do more of them, but with the money that you can make at the Tombs of Amascut, it's really just not worth the time right now. The last question that I posed for this video is going to be, what should jagex be prioritizing for old school RuneScape? And I don't think jagex has actually ever asked this question to the community. You see posts on Reddit that could kind of point them in the right direction depending on how many upvotes they get, but I wanted to ask the question directly to the community that watches my channel. 7,300 votes came in for this poll. The choices were new content, including quest bosses and skills, reworking dead content such as minigames, map areas, etc., fixing known issues, and updating skills to be more interactive. As for the top voted choice, it was reworking dead content such as minigames, map areas, and whatever else. And I honestly wholeheartedly agree with that 51% of people that said that this would be the best thing that they should be prioritizing on. There is a ton of dead content in old school RuneScape, and it doesn't just extend to minigames, but I am going to use that as an example. Take Trouble Brewing, for example. Trouble Brewing is dead, doesn't matter what world you go to, and the Castle Wars is actually the same, it's just not fun anymore. These two things, just as an example, have more or less turned into nothing but a grind for filling out collection log slots. As for the second place choice, new content, that was voted by 22% of the people. I really don't think new content should be a priority right now. jagex is working on the new Desert Treasure quest and obviously the new skill that we're supposed to be getting sometime near the end of this year. I really don't think that should be a priority for old school RuneScape right now because there is so much stuff in the game that could use a rework. As for the other two choices, fixing known issues at 15% and updating skills to be more interactive, I don't really agree with these because jagex does put out patches every update, so they are working on known issues. They might not come as fast as you would like, but every time you do see updates, usually there's a little blurb at the bottom like, hey, we also fixed this. As for updating skills to be more interactive, I put that as a choice because I thought it would be a good choice for people to think about. As for me, I don't really think many of the skills need to be updated. I personally like the way old school RuneScape is as it is right now. As one of the most grindy RPGs that there have ever been, I think it needs to stick to its roots and keep that grindiness. Not every skill should be easy to get 99. It shouldn't be super interactive. I think there needs to be a little bit of determination to get to those 99s, which will take you some hours and repetitive action. So all of these polls are still on my community page. You can go check them out if you want to read the comments or discuss with anybody else who may have commented on it. I actually like to read these comments. I would actually like to hear from you guys and see if there are any ideas for questions that you guys would like to pose to the community. And I could throw some of those in depending on how well this video does and if people like it and if they want to see what their fellow old school RuneScape players think or think should be done to the game. So that is going to do it for this one. Thank you all for watching this video. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a thumbs up down below. Every like helps this video's popularity. It helps it to reach more people. Other people that might find it interesting can then see it in their suggested. If you have not done so yet, please tap that subscribe button on your way out. I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching. Take it easy.